When the flight attendant closed the cabin door, the world outside fell away. Just snow, silence, and a man who thought he'd already won life. Ethan Marlowe, 38, CEO of Marlowe Strategies, sat by the window with his usual calm precision. He'd built a company from scratch, negotiated mergers worth billions, and been called the man who never loses. But tonight, as Christmas lights flickered across the city below, he felt the dull ache of something he couldn't quantify, the kind of emptiness success can't fill. The plane hummed with low chatter, passengers settling into their seats. Ethan opened his laptop, ready to bury himself in spreadsheets like he always did. He didn't notice the little girl until she spoke. "You look sad, mister." Ethan turned. A child no older than 5 stood in the aisle, holding a stuffed bunny with one ear missing. Her hair was a soft copper, tied in uneven pigtails, and her dress had the word joy embroidered across the front, faded letters that made him oddly self-conscious. "Sad?" he repeated. "I'm not sad." The girl studied him for a moment, serious as a judge. "You have tired eyes. My mommy says people get tired eyes when they forget how to be happy." Ethan blinked. "Your mommy sounds very smart." "She is," the girl said proudly, "but she cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping." A voice cut in from behind, weary, apologetic, and familiar in its exhaustion. "Sophie, I told you to stay close." A woman hurried down the aisle, early 30s, messy bun, gray coat too thin for December, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. "I'm so sorry," she told Ethan. "She likes to talk to strangers." "No harm done," he said, closing his laptop. "We were just talking about happiness." "Oh, were you?" the woman said, half smiling, half mortified. "I'm Claire Dawson, and this is Sophie, my very outspoken daughter." "Ethan," he said simply. "Nice to meet you both." "Your seats are back here, ma'am," the attendant said, gesturing toward economy. Claire nodded, reaching for Sophie's hand, but Ethan's voice stopped her. "Wait, there's plenty of room up here. Why don't you sit with me?" Claire froze. "We couldn't possibly—" "It's fine," Ethan said, already signaling the attendant. "It's Christmas. Let's bend a rule or two." 10 minutes later, Claire and Sophie were seated beside him. Sophie already marveling at the seat controls and free chocolate bars. Claire sat stiffly, unsure why a stranger, a CEO at that, would go out of his way for them. "You really didn't have to," she said softly. "I know," Ethan replied. "But I wanted to." For a long time, the three of them sat in silence, broken only by the quiet hum of the engines. Then Claire spoke again. "We're moving to San Francisco. My mom passed away last month, and I needed a change, a new start." "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "Losing a parent leaves a hole nothing fills." Claire nodded. "I was her caregiver for 2 years. She was my anchor. Now it's just me and Sophie. Starting over sounds brave, but really, it's just terrifying." "Courage usually looks like terror in the beginning," Ethan said, "especially when you're still moving forward anyway." Claire looked at him then, really looked, and saw past the pressed suit and calm demeanor. "You sound like someone who's been moving for a long time without knowing why." He almost laughed. "You're not wrong." As the plane leveled off, the cabin lights dimmed. Sophie fell asleep mid-scribble, her head resting on her stuffed bunny. Claire watched her daughter with the quiet tenderness of someone who's carried too much alone for too long. Ethan found himself watching too. "You're a good mom," he said quietly. "You don't even know me," she replied. "I know what care looks like." She smiled faintly, and for the first time in years, Ethan forgot about profit margins and deadlines. He just sat there feeling the strange peace of connection. When the plane landed, he helped them with their luggage. Claire refused twice before finally letting him carry the heavier bag. Outside, snow fell in gentle spirals, coating the tarmac in white. "Thank you again," Claire said, "for everything." "Merry Christmas," Ethan said, handing Sophie her stuffed bunny. "And Sophie?" The little girl looked up at him. Try to help your mom smile again. She's working too hard at pretending she's fine. Sophie nodded solemnly, and Claire gave him one last uncertain smile before disappearing into the crowd. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. The next morning, Ethan woke to silence. No meetings, no messages, no reason to get out of bed. He glanced at the stuffed reindeer on his desk, a corporate gift from a client, and thought of Sophie's words. You have tired eyes. That afternoon, he found himself driving through the snow, coffee in hand, until he stopped in front of a small apartment complex. He didn't know why he was there, only that it felt right. He knocked. Claire opened the door, startled. Mr. Marlowe? Ethan, he corrected. I, brought cocoa mix. Sophie mentioned she liked it. Claire laughed softly. You really didn't need to. I know, he said again, but maybe I wanted to. That became their rhythm. Visits that started with excuses, returning Sophie's lost glove, checking if they'd settled in, soon turned into dinners, shared stories, quiet nights filled with laughter instead of loneliness. Sophie adored him, Claire trusted him, and Ethan began to feel human again. One evening after Sophie had gone to bed, Claire and Ethan sat by the window watching snow fall over the city. You're different from the man I met on that plane, she said. You were guarded, cold. And now? Now you look like someone who remembers what warmth feels like. He smiled faintly. You did that. I didn't do anything, she said. You let yourself. Ethan leaned back, thinking of the years he'd wasted building walls. When my father died, I promised myself I'd never need anyone again. I thought independence meant safety. It doesn't, Claire said softly. It just means loneliness with better furniture. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that releases something long held. Over the next months, their bond deepened. Ethan found excuses to be around, taking Sophie to school, fixing Claire's old laptop, introducing her to clients who needed design work. But more than that, he was simply present. The man who once measured his life in profits now measured it in smiles. Still, not everything was easy. Gossip blogs caught wind of their connection. Cold CEO caught playing family. Ethan's board whispered about distractions. Claire heard the rumors too. One night she faced him directly. Ethan, I can't let you ruin your reputation because of us. My reputation isn't what makes me who I am, he said, and you're not ruining anything. You're saving me. She hesitated. Are you sure this isn't guilt disguised as kindness? Claire, he said quietly, before you and Sophie, I had everything that was supposed to make a man happy, but I was dead inside. You didn't remind me how to love others. You reminded me how to live. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know if I'm ready to love again. Then don't, he said. Just stay. We'll figure the rest out together. By spring, their lives had intertwined completely. Sophie had begun calling him Mr. Ethan, though sometimes, when she was sleepy, it slipped into Daddy. Each time, Claire's heart clenched, fear and hope intertwined. One Saturday morning, they visited the park where Ethan had first shown them the city skyline. Sophie was chasing pigeons while Claire watched, bundled in her scarf. Ethan stood beside her. What are you thinking? He asked. That maybe I'm allowed to be happy again, she said. And you? That maybe happiness isn't something you earn. It's something you stumble into when you stop running. He reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. 6 months later, Ethan proposed in that very same park. Sophie held the ring box with trembling excitement, shouting, Say yes, Mommy! Claire laughed through her tears. Yes. Their wedding was small, family, a few close friends, nothing flashy, but it was filled with light, the kind that warms without burning. When Sophie sprinkled petals down the aisle, she whispered to Ethan, Now your eyes aren't tired anymore. And she was right, because Ethan's eyes weren't tired anymore. They were alive. That Christmas, their first together as a family, they decorated the tree with mismatched ornaments and lopsided stars. Sophie made hot cocoa, spilling half the powder on the counter. Claire sang softly along to the radio, and Ethan, for the first time in 15 years, turned off his phone. Outside, the snow fell just like that night on the plane. Quiet, endless, forgiving. Ethan stood by the window, holding Claire close, watching Sophie dance around the living room in her pajamas. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who believed loneliness was strength. And then he whispered to Claire, "Sometimes the smallest voices say the biggest truths." She smiled against his chest. "Like what?" "Like when a little girl tells a stranger, 'You look sad.'" Claire looked up at him. "And he finally decides to stop being." "Exactly," he said, "and start living."